Hey guys, my name is Jeff, and today I want to talk to you about a verse that's often misquoted and the true meaning is often missed. And that verse is Revelation 3:20. Let's take a look at what it says. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. We'll dive into the meaning of Revelation 3:20 in just a minute. But before we do, would you just take a few seconds to like this video and then also subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date on videos that are coming out. All right, let's get back to Revelation 3:20. Whenever I hear this verse, I think of this picture. And maybe you've seen this picture before in your grandparents' house or that church that you went to growing up as a kid. It's a very common picture. And besides being really cheesy and Jesus being pasty white, I actually don't have a ton theologically wrong with this picture. The issue is that we often look at this picture or this verse and we think that this is Jesus standing on the outside of an unbeliever's heart, knocking and asking to come in. The problem is with Revelation 3:20, this verse is not addressed to the unbeliever. It's addressed to a church. And so what I want to do in this video is I want to look at the context in which Revelation 3:20 is written and see what the true meaning of this verse actually is and how it applies to our life. So let's jump into the context of Revelation 3:20. In the first few chapters of Revelation, John, the author, is recording a message from God to 7 churches. And it's important that we note that these 7 churches are real places full of real people. And they're people that John would have known. He would have met, he would have visited, he would have pastored to. These are real places that John would have been to. So as he's writing these words, he's not just writing words that would end up in the Bible, he's writing words that are addressed to a specific people. And when it comes to Revelation 3:20, this is part of an address to the church in Laodicea. And when we're trying to figure out what Revelation 3:20 means for us today, we first need to look back and see what was happening in that church and what was happening in that area. You see, Laodicea was positioned in a heavily resourced area. And because of this, they lived pretty comfortable lives and they became pretty self-sufficient. They took pride in caring for things themselves, so much so that in 60 AD, when an earthquake struck their area and destroyed much of their city, they refused help from the Roman government and instead insisted on paying for the rebuild themselves. They were a very self-sufficient people. And this attitude of self-sufficiency had spilled over in the church. You see, this church in Laodicea thought they had it all together. They thought they were good enough to get by. They kind of abandoned relying on God because they thought they could rely on their own strength and their own wealth. And so what John is doing in Revelation 3, what God is communicating to the church in Laodicea is you're not as good as you think you are. In your pursuit of becoming self-sufficient, you've actually become useless. You see, this church is stuck in neutral and now they have a choice to make. Are they going to keep relying on their own strength? Or are they going to admit their dire need for God and rely on His strength? And that's where Revelation 3:20 comes in, where it paints this picture of Jesus standing on the outside knocking. And the question for them is, will they let Jesus in? Okay, now that we know the context of Revelation 3:20, I want to shift gears and look at 3 lessons that we can learn and apply to our lives today from this verse. The first lesson is this: permission is sacred. Have you ever wondered why Jesus is pictured standing on the outside knocking? I mean, he has the power, he has the authority, he could just kick the door in and barge his way in. He doesn't have to stand on the outside and knock and wait, but he does. Why? Because permission is sacred. You see, Jesus chooses to wait and knock because he desires something that authority and power can't buy. He wants a relationship with his creation, a relationship of mutual choosing. And where there's not permission, there can't be love. You see, love cannot be forced. Love has to be granted permission, which is why permission is sacred. And that's why Jesus stands on the outside and knocks. Jesus stands at your door because permission is sacred. You have to make the choice to let him in or to leave him on the outside. He wants more than anything to be in a relationship with you, but he will never force it because permission is sacred. The second thing that Revelation 3:20 teaches us is that it's our invitation to extend. You see, this passage isn't about Jesus inviting us into something better. Rather, the role is reversed and we are inviting him into our life. Remember, permission is sacred, and this is our invitation that we extend to Jesus to come into our lives. This passage to the Laodicean church is showing them how they've become self-sufficient and pushed Jesus out of their life. In essence, what Revelation 3:20 is doing is it's an offer to re-invite Jesus into their life, to admit that they have a need for Jesus. You see, this passage shows us that it's our invitation to extend to Jesus. He's waiting for us to open the door and let him in. Revelation 3:20 is a question asking us if we're going to extend our invitation to let Jesus into our life. The third lesson that we can learn from Revelation 3:20 is that inviting Jesus in changes everything. Maybe you look at this verse and see this picture and you think, why in the world would these Christians, why in the world would this church not let Jesus in? I mean, they're like on the same team, right? So why are they keeping Jesus on the outside? And the reason is that they recognize that if they let Jesus into their life, that means that something in their life has to change. You see, by letting Jesus into our life, that means we're giving him permission to start this transformation in us, to remove the dead parts, to remove the ugly parts, and to grow in us something that's beautiful. But that transformative process isn't always easy, and it's often painful, which is why the church in Laodicea and many of us today, we often leave Jesus on the outside because we recognize that this process is messy, it's painful, and it's difficult. So many of us, we prefer to just not even bother. And so we keep Jesus on the outside because it's safer that way. But there's life on the other side of that process. When we go through that process with Jesus, it will be difficult. But the life on the other side is so incredibly worth it. And the church in Laodicea, by keeping Jesus on the outside, the reality is they were the ones missing out. They thought they were avoiding pain, but really they were just keeping more pain for themselves, because Jesus' pain is momentary. And then life comes back into our life. But the church in Laodicea and many of us today, we choose to continue living with the dead parts of our life still inside of us. And Revelation 3:20 is an invitation for us to find a better way to live. It won't be easy. It'll be messy. It'll be difficult. It'll be painful. But the life on the other side of that process is so worth it. And this passage shows us that Jesus is standing on the outside of our door, knocking, waiting to come in. And the question that arises from this passage is, will we give him permission? Will we invite him back into our lives and let him get into those parts of our life that we don't want to admit that are there, so that he can redeem us and restore us? Jesus wants more than anything to be in a relationship with you, and he's just waiting for your permission. So, will you let him in? Thanks for watching. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that this helped you rethink some aspects of your life and your faith. If it did, would you like this video and then also subscribe to this channel so that you can stay up to date on videos that are coming out? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.